Sometimes, in the vast stretch of the frontier, a man finds that the weight of hardship is heavier than the very earth beneath his boots. Bill, a worn cowboy with a face etched by sun and sorrow, stood at the edge of a mountain logging camp, his heart as restless as the wind that howled through the pines. He had come seeking work, a chance to fill his pockets and quiet the gnawing hunger in his belly, but every day felt like a game of poker with fate, and today, luck was not on his side. Beside him, loyal Roger, a German shepherd with a coat the color of midnight, watched with keen eyes that pierced through the shadows, sensing the unease that lingered like smoke in the air. Bill had always trusted Roger's instincts. They had weathered storms and fought off dangers together, but this day felt different, like a storm gathering on the horizon, charged with something unnatural. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with bruised hues of purple and gold, a crate caught Bill's eye at the camp. It was battered and old, its wood worn smooth by time and curiosity. With a sense of foreboding, he approached, only to find Roger staring intently at the crate's false bottom, a look of warning in his eyes that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. Flickering lanterns surrounded them, casting shadows that danced without a source, whispering secrets of the night. What dark mystery lay hidden beneath the surface of this crate? What supernatural force was stirring in the depths of the logging camp? The stakes had risen from mere survival to a fight against something far more sinister. Now, dear listener, as you settle in, ask yourself, would you dare to uncover the truth, or would you turn back from the darkness? If you're ready for the ride, make sure you're subscribed. The frontier holds many secrets, and this one is just beginning to unravel. The night draped itself over the mountain logging camp like a moth-eaten blanket, shadowy pines towering against a sky studded with stars. Bill had ridden hard to reach this remote stretch of the west, the hooves of his chestnut mare, Daisy, thudding softly on the damp earth. He dismounted with a grunt, dusting off his chaps, while Roger, his German shepherd, stood sentinel by his side, nose twitching as he caught the scent of the night. The camp was a collection of rough-hewn shanties, their weathered wood gray with age and the passing of countless seasons. Flickering lanterns hung outside the largest shack, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like restless spirits across the ground. Bill squinted at the glow, feeling the familiar tightening in his chest. Trouble had a way of creeping into a place like this, and his instincts were sharper than a rattlesnake's fang. "Looks like we've got company, boy," Bill murmured, scratching Roger behind the ears. The dog's dark eyes held a glimmer of unease, fixating on one particular lantern that flickered more erratically than the rest. It bobbed in the chill breeze, casting eerie shapes that made the shadows seem alive. Bill stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel and twigs. "Mighty peculiar for a night like this," he muttered, not fully convinced the flickering was just the wind. There was a hollowness in the air, a silence that pressed against him as if the world was holding its breath. "Come on, let's have a look-see." They made their way toward the lanterns, their yellow glow beckoning like a siren's call. The sounds of laughter and the clinking of whiskey bottles spilled from the shack, a raucous gathering of loggers unwinding after a long day's toil. Bill had a mind to join them, but the odd flicker kept drawing him back, a nagging feeling crawling up his spine. "Stay close, Roger," he ordered, and the dog obeyed, tail low and ears perked, every sense on high alert. As they approached, the laughter turned to murmurs, curiosity lacing through the air. Bill stepped inside, the warmth of the fire inside washing over him, but something in the back of his mind still gnawed. "Bill, you old son of a gun!" shouted a grizzled man with a bushy beard and a face that looked like it had wrestled with a mountain. "We thought you'd gone and got lost. Just had to catch a breather, old Gus," Bill replied, shaking the man's hand with a firm grip. "What's this I hear about a crate?" Gus's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Aye, that there crate's the talk of the camp. Bid on it at the last auction, but it's been sitting there like a stubborn mule. Nothing but trouble if you ask me." Bill nodded, his interest piqued. "What's in it?" "No one knows. Ain't nobody brave enough to pry it open. They say it gives off a feeling, a strange one, like the hair on your neck stands up." The old man's grin widened. "You're just the fella for the job, if you ask me." Bill felt Roger's body tense beside him, the dog still fixated on the lanterns. He glanced over his shoulder. One flickered violently, then steadied, its light casting a pale glow that illuminated the corner where the crate stood. It was a sturdy box, bound with iron and splintered wood, as if it had traveled a long way to find its resting place. "Let me take a gander at it," Bill said, curiosity battling with caution. He pushed through the throng of men, Roger trailing closely, the dog's eyes darting around as if sensing an unseen presence. As he reached the crate, he knelt beside it, his hand brushing against the rough wood. "Looks like it's seen better days," he muttered, tracing the seams where the boards met. The lanterns flickered again, and for a moment Bill thought he saw shadows flit across the surface of the crate, shapes that didn't belong. "You ain't scared, are ya?" called out a voice, mocking yet amused. A wiry fellow leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes glinting. Could be spirits in there waiting to escape. Bill shot him a glare, but his pulse quickened at the thought. "Spirits don't scare me, friend. I've wrestled with my share of ghosts." Roger growled low in his throat, a sound that cut through the laughter and chatter. Bill turned to the dog, who stood rigid, eyes fixed on the crate, as if it held the weight of the world. "What's got you spooked, Roger?" The dog let out a soft whine, inching closer as though the crate were calling to him in a language only he could understand. Bill's heart raced. Something was off, and he could feel it in the marrow of his bones. "Open it up!" someone shouted, egging him on, and the others joined in, laughter bubbling like boiling water. Bill's brow furrowed. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, but there was a darkness clinging to the air that had him second-guessing. With a deep breath, Bill reached for the iron latch, feeling the chill of metal against his palm. "Hold on, everyone," he said, his voice steady, but his heart thrumming in his chest. The flickering lanterns dimmed as he lifted the latch, and Roger's growl deepened, a warning echoing in the stillness. In that moment, with the whole camp watching, Bill had the unsettling feeling that whatever lay within the crate had a mind of its own. The lanterns flickered violently one last time, plunging the room into shadows before settling back to their eerie glow. With one final glance at Roger, who stared unblinking at the crate's false bottom, Bill prepared to unveil the mystery that had drawn him into this web of the unknown. The latch creaked under Bill's thumb, the sound slicing through the drunken laughter like a knife. He felt the eyes of the gathered loggers on him, their anticipation thick enough to choke a mule. With a deep breath, he lifted the lid just a crack, a sliver of darkness yawning before him. Roger's growl intensified, a low rumble that vibrated in Bill's bones. The dog's eyes flared with a warning that gnawed at Bill's instincts. Something wasn't right about this crate. It felt like opening the door to a storm that had been brewing just out of sight. "Come on, Bill! Don't leave us hanging!" Someone hollered from the back, their voice laced with booze and bravado. Ignoring the jibes, Bill leaned closer, peering into the yawning void. The interior was cloaked in shadows, the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic wafting out like a ghostly whisper. He fished out his knife, a trusty blade worn smooth from years of use, and pried the lid open wider. As he did, the air around him grew heavy, charged with an energy that felt alive. With a flick of his wrist, he brushed aside some hay that had been tossed in as packing. He felt Roger tense beside him, the dog stepping closer, his nose twitching as if sensing secrets buried deep. The flickering lantern light danced across the edges of the crate, illuminating a surface that looked almost too polished for something so weathered. "Y'all seeing this?" Bill muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He reached into the crate, his hand brushing against something smooth and cold. It was a small box, ornately carved, its surface glimmering in the dim light, as though it were infused with a life of its own. "Looking like you found a treasure, cowboy," Gus guffawed, though his laughter had a nervous edge to it. "Or maybe a curse." Bill shot him a sidelong glance. "Could be both, Gus. Best keep your distance." He pulled the box from the crate, placing it on the floor before him. It was a strange piece, adorned with swirling designs that seemed to twist and turn, like the river bends. The craftsmanship was exquisite, but as Bill traced the carvings with his finger, a shiver ran up his spine, feeling as if the box were pulsing with some hidden rhythm. Roger whined softly, his gaze unflinching. Bill frowned, noting how the dog's fur bristled along his back, every instinct honed and alert. "What is it, boy?" he asked, turning his attention back to the box. Roger tilted his head, eyes wide and watchful, as if he were waiting for Bill to decipher the mystery that lay before them. "Open it!" another logger shouted, his voice thick with excitement. "Hold your horses," Bill replied, holding the box aloft. "This ain't no ordinary trinket. Might be better off leaving it be." But the temptation was a snake coiling in his gut. What secrets lay locked away inside? Before he could think better of it, Bill unscrewed the clasp. The box creaked open with a sound like the sigh of a long-buried secret. Inside, nestled within a bed of velvet, was an object wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth. With cautious fingers, he pulled it free, revealing a small, intricately carved figurine. A man on horseback, eyes wide with fear, the horse's mane flowing like smoke. "Now, what in tarnation is that?" Gus leaned closer, squinting at the figure, while the others gathered, their laughter replaced with a hushed curiosity. "It's a cowboy," Bill said, though the words felt foreign on his tongue. "Looks more like a warning than a decoration." The atmosphere shifted as he held the figure aloft. A chill seeped into the air, and a sudden gust blew through the shack, extinguishing a few lanterns. Shadows flickered and danced, and Roger let out a low growl, his body tense and ready. "Darn it, Bill! You're making the hairs on my neck stand up," Gus exclaimed, backing away as if the figure were a rattlesnake poised to strike. "Maybe we should put it back," Bill said, his voice steadier than he felt. He caught sight of Roger, who had planted himself in front of Bill, as if guarding against whatever dark spirits might be unleashed. But before he could make his move, a voice echoed from the corner of the room, a voice that was neither young nor old, but filled with a strange, haunting timbre. "The past is a heavy burden, cowboy. Some things are better left buried." The laughter died, and silence enveloped the shack like a shroud. Bill's heart raced as he searched the dim corners, the source of the voice hidden from view. "Who's there?" he called, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. "Fate has a way of catching up," the voice continued, almost melodic, "and sometimes the things we uncover have a way of uncovering us." Roger's growl morphed into a bark, echoing through the silence, and Bill could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him. He tightened his grip on the figurine, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. "Get out!" someone shouted, panic rising as the loggers backed away, their earlier bravado evaporating. "That ain't no toy, it's bad news. Maybe we should—" Bill began, but the shadows swirled around him, whispering secrets he couldn't comprehend. The box, the figure, the voice. It was all intertwining into something larger, something ominous. As he looked down at the figurine, the man's face seemed to twist in agony, and a flash of memory sparked in his mind. A flicker of a time-long past, of a cowboy lost to the sands of time, caught in a cycle he couldn't escape. "Roger," Bill said, his voice firm now, "we need to leave." But as he turned to back away, the ground beneath him felt unstable, as though the very earth was shifting, and the laughter of the loggers turned into a cacophony of whispers, urging him to stay, to listen. "Some secrets are better left undisturbed," the voice chimed once more, echoing in the depths of the shadows. Bill felt the weight of the crate pressing upon him, a dark reminder that in the wild frontier, the past had a way of coming back, sometimes with a vengeance. The shadows in the shack seemed to writhe and stretch like the tendrils of a forgotten nightmare. Bill's heart raced, but he forced himself to think. There had to be a way to make sense of this madness. He glanced down at the figurine, the man on horseback forever caught in an expression of sheer terror. Bill couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than mere wood. It held a story, a history wrapped tight in layers of fear. "Gus," he called, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing attention to the unease brewing among the loggers. "You got that lantern with you? We need light to see what we're dealing with." Gus nodded, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. "I reckon we're dealing with more than just shadows, Bill." His voice quivered, and he hurried to retrieve the lantern, hands shaking as he struck a match. As the flame flickered to life, the yellow glow pushed back the darkness and illuminated the carved figurine in Bill's hand. "There's something real peculiar about this thing," he said, glancing at Roger, who remained steadfast by his side, ears perked and nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. With renewed determination, Bill knelt down, placing the figurine carefully on the table. The velvet-lined box had attracted dust, but he noticed something glimmering beneath it, a small, folded piece of parchment that had been hidden in the shadows. He carefully slid the box aside and retrieved the note, unfolding it gingerly as if it might crumble to dust at any moment. Roger pressed closer, his eyes locked on the paper as if he sensed its importance. Bill read aloud, his brow furrowing at the spidery handwriting. "To whomever finds this, beware the rider of the storm, for he is bound to the land, a ghost whose spirit has yet to find peace." He looked up, confusion etched on his face. "What in Sam Hill is a rider of the storm?" "Sounds like a tall tale to me," Gus said, shaking his head. "Like something out of them dime novels. You sure that ain't just some crazy old miner's rambling?" "Maybe, but it don't feel like just a story," Bill replied, his instincts prickling. He turned the note over, but it was blank, offering no further clues. "There's more to this than meets the eye. We need to dig deeper." As he pondered the implications of the note, a low growl emanated from Roger, who had moved back to the door, hackles raised. The air grew thick, and a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a chill creeping down Bill's spine. He felt as if a storm was brewing not just outside, but within the very walls of the shack. "Let's not tarry," Bill said, his voice firm as he stood. "If this storm rider is real, we best not stick around to find out what he wants." He secured the figurine back in the box, feeling a reluctant pull from the object as he did so. It felt as if it were calling to him, beckoning him to uncover its secrets, yet he knew better than to heed its siren call. With Roger leading the way, they stepped outside, the cool night air biting against their skin. The moon hung high, casting a silver sheen over the landscape, illuminating the rugged terrain like a ghostly spotlight. The river nearby whispered secrets as it meandered through the valley, its sound almost like a warning. "Bill!" Gus called from behind, urgency in his tone. "You ain't gonna believe this!" Bill turned, his heart skipping a beat as he saw Gus standing at the edge of the riverbank, pointing towards something partially buried in the mud, a skeletal hand clawing its way back to the surface, adorned with a rusted ring that glimmered in the moonlight. "Darn it!" Bill exclaimed, stepping closer, dread pooling in his gut. "What in the world?" Roger's growl deepened, vibrating in his chest as he stood protectively in front of Bill, eyes locked on the hand, as if he could sense the spirit trapped within. "This ain't just any old skeleton," Bill muttered, kneeling down to inspect the remains. "It looks like it belonged to someone who met a nasty end." Gus swallowed hard, looking over his shoulder as if expecting the past to rise up and confront them. "We should go, Bill. That hand's bad news. I can feel it." And before Bill could respond, a rustle broke the silence, a low rumble echoing through the valley. It was as if the earth itself was stirring, responding to the disturbance they had unearthed. The air thickened, and Bill could almost hear whispers riding the wind, a cacophony of voices begging to be heard. "We can't leave it like this, Gus," Bill said, determination hardening his resolve. "There's a story here, and I aim to find it. Whatever this storm rider is, he's connected to the land. And to this hand," Roger barked, his eyes darting to the trees lining the riverbank, tense and alert, as if sensing something approaching. Bill felt a jolt of instinct. Something was coming. "Let's make this quick then," he said, glancing around as the shadows seemed to shift. "We'll dig it up, see what we can learn, and then hightail it out of here." As they began to unearth the skeletal remains, the wind picked up, swirling around them, an ominous presence manifesting in the darkness. The night had only begun to unfurl its secrets, and Bill could feel the weight of the past pressing upon him like a storm on the horizon. Whatever mysteries lay ahead, he knew they were just the beginning, and the truth had a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected of forms. The moon hung heavy in the sky, its silver glow illuminating the graveyard of shadows around them. Bill knelt in the mud, fingers trembling slightly as he brushed away the damp earth, revealing more of the skeletal hand. Roger, ever vigilant, stood by his side, eyes scanning the surrounding trees, ears perked for any hint of danger. The growl in his throat was a low rumble that echoed the unease in the air. "Darn it, this feels like opening a can of worms," Gus muttered, his voice barely above a whisper as he joined Bill at the riverbank. "You reckon this is some kind of curse? I don't want to end up like that poor soul." Curses don't scare me half as much as the living, Bill replied, his voice steady, though the words dripped with an undercurrent of uncertainty. But there's something tied to this here land, Gus. You can feel it in your bones. He paused to wipe his brow, the chill of the evening air sending shivers down his spine. We ain't the first to tread here, and if the past has a say, we won't be the last. With renewed determination, he dug deeper, revealing more of the skeletal remains. Each scoop of dirt brought forth not just bones, but a sense of history, a life lived, perhaps cut short by some cruel twist of fate. Look here, he said, pointing to the ring still clinging to the decayed finger. That's a mighty fine piece of metal for someone who's been 6 feet under. Gus squinted, leaning closer. Could be it belonged to someone important, a sheriff maybe, or a rich fella who didn't quite see the end coming. Aye, Bill said, his mind racing. Or a man who crossed paths with the rider of the storm. He paused, letting the words settle like dust in the air. The note mentioned a ghost, and this hand, it might be the key to understanding who that ghost was and why he's still haunting this place. Roger's growl escalated, a warning note that made the hairs on the back of Bill's neck stand on end. Easy, boy, he murmured, patting the dog's head with a calming hand. We're just trying to solve a mystery, not stir up trouble. The wind picked up again, twisting through the trees like a restless spirit. Bill caught a whiff of something acrid, like burnt sage, and glanced around, the shadows dancing menacingly. We should be quick about this, he urged, the weight of Roger's alertness pressing on him. Digging up a dead man's bones ain't a social call, and I got a feeling we ain't alone out here. They worked in silence, the only sounds the rustling leaves and the occasional splash of the river nearby. As Bill unearthed the last remnants of the skeleton, he spotted something glimmering near the ribcage. He hesitated, a chill running down his spine. Gus, come take a look at this. Gus knelt beside him, eyes wide, as he pointed to a small, intricately carved amulet that had been hidden in the earth. What in tarnation is that? Looks like it could tell a tale or two. Bill gently picked it up, its surface cool against his palm. It was a pendant in the shape of a storm cloud, raindrops etched into the metal, shimmering faintly, as if the very essence of the storm was trapped within. This ain't just any old trinket, he said, his heart racing. It's a charm, a protection symbol, I reckon. Maybe the rider of the storm had some connection to it. Before he could ponder the meaning further, a low, rumbling sound echoed across the valley, growing louder and more menacing. The very ground beneath their feet vibrated with a power that felt otherworldly. Roger barked fiercely, tail tucked as he backed away, urging Bill and Gus to rise. Time to skedaddle, Gus shouted, scrambling to his feet, fear etched on his face. I don't like the feel of this at all. Bill's instincts kicked in, his heart pounding like a war drum as he stuffed the amulet into his pocket, casting a glance at the river that now seemed to writhe with shadows. We need to get back to the shack fast. There's something awakening, and I don't reckon it's friendly. They bolted up the riverbank, Roger leading the way, his senses sharp and tuned to the unseen. The wind howled like a banshee, and the moonlight flickered as clouds rolled in, swallowing the landscape in darkness. Bill's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the mystery as they sprinted. Bill! Gus called out, panting hard as they reached the threshold of the shack. What if that storm rider is real? What if he's been waiting for someone to uncover the truth? Then we'd best be ready to face him, Bill replied, fear and resolve battling in his chest. Whatever's bound to this land, it won't rest until its story's told. And if I'm to be the one to tell it, I'll do so with every bit of grit I've got. As they entered the shack, the door creaked ominously behind them, echoing the tension in the air. Bill felt a heavy weight settle around him, a shroud of anticipation as the world outside grew eerily silent. The storm was brewing, and he was caught in its grasp, unaware that the truth they sought might lead them to the very heart of darkness. The wind rattled the shack as Bill slammed the door behind them, locking out the chill and the unseen horrors lurking beyond. The dim light from a single oil lamp flickered, casting long shadows that danced on the wooden walls. Roger paced anxiously, his ears perked and nose twitching as he scanned the small interior, ever on guard for the trouble that might come creeping through the cracks. Settle down, boy, Bill murmured, trying to mask his own unease. He reached for the lantern, adjusting the wick to brighten the light, the flickering flames illuminating the room with a soft, warm glow that felt like a flimsy shield against the encroaching night. "We've got to think clear now. That storm rider, if he's real, we need to know what he wants." Gus leaned against the rough-hewn table, his face pale as he wiped sweat from his brow. "Maybe we ought to just hightail it out of here, Bill. I ain't ever seen anything like that before, and I reckon I don't care to again." Bill shook his head, drawing in a deep breath that smelled of aged wood and the lingering scent of sagebrush. "Running ain't gonna solve this. We stumbled onto something big, Gus. Ghosts don't just float on by without a reason. We owe it to whoever this fella was to see it through. We've got the bones, the amulet, and now we need to figure out what's next." Roger's growl deepened, and he trotted to the window, nose pressed against the glass, eyes wide with an intensity that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "Easy, Roger," Bill said, feeling the weight of his dog's instincts. "You smell something?" The dog's posture was tense, and Bill could see the muscles rippling beneath his fur. Gus joined him at the window, peering through the glass at the darkened landscape. "Ain't nothing out there but shadows, and the trees looking like they're trying to reach out and grab us." "Maybe that's the trick," Bill mused, rubbing his chin as he recalled the amulet's shape. "A storm cloud, remember? What if that means something more than just a fancy piece of metal? What if it's connected to the weather, to the storm that's coming?" "Could be," Gus replied, uncertainty lacing his tone, "but it sure ain't feeling friendly. Why don't we take a look at that note again? Maybe there's something we missed." Nodding, Bill retrieved the crumpled paper from his pocket, unfolding it carefully, his heart thumping as he read the words under the flickering lantern light. "Here it is," he said, scanning the lines. "Talks about a rider who brings the storms, one who takes what he desires and leaves destruction in his wake." "Sounds like a real charmer," Gus muttered, crossing his arms. "And what's this about a pact with the land?" Bill's brow furrowed as he reread the passage. "Says here he made a deal, binding him to this place. But there's a line scratched out. Might be important, but I can't make heads or tails of it." Roger suddenly let out a sharp bark, breaking the tension, and Bill's heart raced. He moved to the window, peering through the glass once more. The shadows outside had thickened, swirling like dark smoke against the pale light of the moon, which had now hidden behind a thick curtain of clouds. "Gus, grab that lantern. We're going out to see what Roger's barking about." "Out there? You must be out of your mind," Gus protested, but the urgency in Bill's voice left no room for argument. "Trust me, we need to know if whatever's out there is gonna come for us, or if it's just the wind playing tricks." Gus swallowed hard but nodded, and they both grabbed their hats, stepping cautiously to the door. Bill opened it a crack, the hinges creaking ominously, and the wind rushed in, wrapping around them like a cold embrace. Roger darted out first, his keen instincts guiding him, while Bill and Gus followed closely, lantern held high. The world outside had transformed. The river shimmered under the errant moonlight, while the trees seemed to sway with a life of their own, whispering secrets in a language long forgotten. The air was electric, charged with a sense of anticipation that hummed in their bones. "Keep your eyes peeled," Bill warned, scanning the terrain. "If that rider's out here, he won't be happy with us digging up his past." As they moved cautiously towards the riverbank, Roger suddenly stopped, his fur bristling as he stared into the dark thicket of trees. Bill's heart raced. "What is it, boy?" Then, just beyond the shadows, they heard it, a low, echoing laugh, like the rumble of thunder rolling through the mountains. It sent chills down Bill's spine, and he felt the amulet in his pocket grow warm against his skin. "What in tarnation was that?" Gus whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "Only one way to find out," Bill said, drawing his breath steady as he stepped forward. The mystery deepened around them, cloaked in the night's embrace, and the specter of the storm rider loomed ever closer, waiting for them to uncover the truth that had been buried for far too long. The shadows danced like restless spirits as Bill moved cautiously toward the thicket where Roger stood, a statue of alertness. The dog's ears pricked up, listening for sounds that might betray the presence of the mysterious rider. Bill could feel the weight of the amulet in his pocket, its warmth now pulsating as if it were alive. "Stay close, Gus," he murmured, glancing back at his friend, who was trying to keep his composure amidst the unsettling atmosphere. The lantern's flickering light illuminated the edges of the trees, casting long fingers of shadow that seemed to stretch toward them, reaching out in warning. "Bill, I reckon we ought to head back," Gus said, his voice tight with tension. "Whatever that was, I don't want to stick around to find out." But Bill shook his head, his curiosity igniting like a match in dry brush. "We can't turn back now. If there's something to this storm rider, we need to understand what he wants. That laugh, it felt like it was calling us." As they edged closer, Roger took a step forward, the lantern light catching the glint of his sharp eyes. The dog's instincts were fine-tuned, and Bill trusted his companion's ability to sense danger. "What do you see, boy?" he asked, crouching down to meet Roger's gaze. Roger's nose twitched as he took in the scents of the evening. His growl returned, low and menacing, as he pointed toward a cluster of rocks that jutted from the ground like jagged teeth. "You smell that?" Bill asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gus leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Smells like burnt wood and something else metallic." Bill nodded, the familiar scent wrapping around him like a shroud. "Could be a campfire or something worse. Let's check it out." Creeping toward the rocks, they were careful not to make a sound, the world around them holding its breath. As they approached, the smell grew stronger and a sense of urgency washed over Bill. He felt like they were walking into a trap, but the thrill of discovery pushed him onward. When they reached the clearing, the scene that unfolded before them made the hairs on the back of Bill's neck stand up. There, in the center of the stones, lay remnants of a fire pit, the ashes still warm, and scattered around were odd artifacts. A rusted horseshoe, a shard of broken glass, and an old weathered saddlebag, its leather cracked and peeling. Gus stepped forward, eyes wide. "Now this is peculiar," he said, kneeling beside the saddlebag. "What do you reckon these things are doing here? Ain't like they got lost on the trail." Bill knelt beside him, examining the objects with a sense of wonder. "Could be a sign, something that belonged to the rider. Let's see what's inside." As Bill unbuckled the saddlebag, Roger's growl deepened, and he moved to stand protectively in front of them, scanning the trees as if expecting a shadow to leap from the darkness. "Easy, Roger," Bill said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're just looking." Inside the saddlebag, Bill found a collection of dusty papers and a rusted compass that seemed to spin wildly, as though it were confused about its bearings. He carefully unfolded the papers, revealing sketches of the very landscape around them. But these weren't ordinary maps. They were marked with symbols, lightning bolts, storm clouds, and an intricate design that resembled the amulet. "By thunder," Gus breathed, leaning in closer. "That there's a map to something big. Looks like he was searching for something connected to the storms." Bill nodded, feeling the weight of the discovery. "This ain't just a rider. It's a story, a tale of someone who harnessed the fury of nature." Roger's ears perked up again, and he turned sharply toward the edge of the thicket. The growl faded, replaced by a tense silence that swallowed the sounds of the night. Bill felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Gus," he said slowly, "do you hear that?" A low rumble echoed through the air, a sound that wasn't quite thunder but something deeper, resonating like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The lantern flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to swirl around them. "We need to get back," Gus insisted, his voice trembling slightly. "Whatever we've stirred up, I don't like it one bit." Bill's gaze shifted back to the papers. "We can't leave empty-handed. There's too much here to ignore." Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, snatching the papers from Bill's hands and sending them fluttering into the night like startled birds. "No!" he shouted, lunging after them, but the wind was relentless, carrying the papers deeper into the trees. "Bill, wait!" Gus called, but the urgency of the moment pulled Bill forward. He dashed after the swirling pages, the lantern swinging wildly, illuminating the darkened path ahead. "Hold up, boy!" he shouted back, his heart racing as he chased the papers that danced just out of reach. The wind howled around him, and the earth trembled beneath his feet as if warning him to turn back. Roger barked sharply, and Bill felt a surge of instinct as he pressed on. The thicket closing in around him, the papers settled against the trunk of an ancient tree, its gnarled roots twisting like the fingers of a giant. As he reached out to grab the pages, he caught a glimpse of something else, an etching in the bark that mirrored the symbols from the map. "Gus, get over here!" Bill called, excitement surging through him. The etching seemed to pulse with energy, and as he traced its outline with his fingers, a crackle of electricity raced up his arm. "Bill, we gotta go!" Gus shouted, panic creeping into his voice. But as Bill turned, the shadows around him shifted, coalescing into a figure cloaked in darkness. The rider stood before him, a spectral presence, eyes glinting like distant stars. Bill's breath caught in his throat as he realized that they had not just unearthed history, they had awakened it. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" The figure's voice echoed like thunder, deep and resonant. "You seek the storm, you shall face its wrath." Bill's heart raced and he felt the weight of the amulet in his pocket, pulsing against his skin. They had stumbled into something far greater than they could have imagined. And now, standing at the edge of a mystery that could unravel the very fabric of their world, he knew they had to act swiftly. The spectral rider loomed in the darkness, his form shimmering like a mirage against the backdrop of the moonlit forest. Bill felt the hairs on his neck prickle as he stood frozen, torn between the urge to flee and the burning curiosity that kept his feet anchored to the ground. The wind howled like a wounded animal, whipping around them with a ferocity that seemed to amplify the rider's presence. "Roger!" Bill called, his voice strained. He could see his loyal hound standing at the edge of the clearing, muscles tense and ready to spring, eyes locked on the apparition. "Stay close, boy." The rider's gaze bore down on Bill, a mixture of ancient wisdom and stormy wrath. "You tread upon sacred ground, foolhardy child," he thundered, his voice resonating like the clash of metal in battle. "The storm you seek is not a mere tempest, but a force that binds this land and the souls who roam it." "Listen here," Bill said, forcing himself to meet the rider's gaze, heart pounding like a drum in a showdown. "We ain't looking for trouble. We found your things, and we're just trying to understand." "Understand?" The rider's laughter echoed, chilling Bill to his core. "What man can understand the chaos of nature? You're but a speck in the whirlwind of time." Gus, who had edged closer, finally found his voice. "We got a right to know what's going on here. You left your map, and it led us straight to you. If you're hunting storms, we can help." The rider tilted his head, the shadows flickering like firelight across his spectral features. "Help? The storms are not mere squalls, but the embodiment of fury and vengeance. They must be harnessed, or they shall consume you." Bill felt a swell of determination. "Then tell us how. If this is connected to the storms, we need to know what we're dealing with." The rider's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the winds stilled, as if the very earth was holding its breath. "To seek the storm is to court danger. You must first prove your worth," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Find the heart of the tempest. It lies where the lightning strikes thrice in the night." Bill's mind raced. "Where's that? We can track it." He could feel the amulet pulse softly in his pocket, as if echoing the rider's words, urging him on. "Follow the path of the storm," the rider intoned, gesturing toward the darkened woods that seemed to shift and sway with unseen energy. "But beware, the storm is alive, and it guards its secrets fiercely." Roger let out a low growl, and Bill reached down to stroke the dog's head, grounding himself in the warmth of his companion's presence. "We can handle it, can't we, boy?" he whispered, his voice barely above the wind's moan. "Then go," the rider commanded, his form beginning to dissipate into the shadows. "But know this, the bond between man and nature is fragile. Respect it or be consumed." With that, the rider vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence that draped over the clearing like a heavy blanket. Bill felt a weight settle in his chest, a sense of both dread and purpose intertwining. "Gus, did you see that?" Bill asked, shaking his head to clear the lingering chill of the encounter. "He spoke of the storm like it was alive. We gotta figure out where that lightning strikes." Gus nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Ain't no time to waste then. Let's find that map of yours. We'll need every scrap of information we can get." They hurried back to the ancient tree, the night still hanging thick around them. Bill knelt to retrieve the fluttering pages that had scattered earlier, his heart racing with the thrill of the unknown. As he gathered the sketches, Roger remained alert, nose to the ground, ears twitching at every sound. "Here's one," Bill said, holding up a map that showed a series of jagged peaks, clearly marking where the storms had gathered. There were strange notations scrawled alongside, cryptic phrases that hinted at danger. This might lead us to where that lightning strikes. Gus peered over Bill's shoulder, squinting in the dim light. What's that symbol there? Looks like the same one from the amulet. Bill's fingers brushed against the parchment. The symbol had a swirling design that seemed to swirl like a tempest. By the looks of it, it's marking a location on the mountain range. We need to head there before dawn. Roger barked sharply, breaking the tension, and Bill straightened, sensing the weight of the night pressing in on them. Let's keep moving. We'll need to be on our toes. The two men set off into the darkness, guided only by the flickering light of the lantern and the distant rumble that echoed from the peaks. The forest loomed around them, filled with the whisper of leaves and the rustle of unseen creatures. Gus, you reckon we're biting off more than we can chew? Bill asked, anxiety creeping in despite his bravado. Maybe, Gus replied, keeping his voice low. But we can't back down now. We've got a mystery to unravel, and I reckon the truth won't wait for us to catch our breath. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the wind picked up once more, swirling leaves around their feet like dancing spirits. Bill felt the pull of the amulet, its warmth a reminder of the journey ahead. With Roger at their side, they pressed on, determined to uncover the heart of the storm and the secrets it held, unaware of the forces that lurked just beyond the reach of their lantern's light. The night air hung thick with moisture, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the tang of pine as Bill and Gus pressed deeper into the woods. Roger, ever vigilant, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his nose twitching at the slightest shift in the air. The dog's instincts were sharper than any man's, and Bill often wondered if Roger could sense the unseen energies lurking within the shadows, energies that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Keep your lantern low, Gus," Bill murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't want to attract attention we can't handle." "Right as rain," Gus replied, his fingers tightening around the handle of the lantern. He glanced at the map, squinting at the dim light. "We're headed right for the old Thunder Ridge, ain't we? That's what it looks like." Bill could feel the weight of the amulet against his chest, its warmth both comforting and unnerving. "We gotta be careful. The legends say that place is haunted by the spirits of those lost in the storms." "Legends, huh? Sounds like a heap of yarns to me," Gus scoffed, though there was an edge of unease in his voice. "But I reckon there's some truth to every tall tale." They continued their trek, the underbrush crackling beneath their boots. The trees stood tall and stoic, their branches reaching toward the heavens like ancient sentinels. The wind howled softly through the leaves, carrying with it the distant rumble of thunder that felt both ominous and inviting. It was as if the storm was calling them, beckoning them closer. "Bill," Gus said, breaking the silence, "what if we find more than just the heart of the storm? What if there's something in that crate, something we ain't ready to face?" Bill paused, his breath hitching in his throat. He thought of the spectral rider and the fury that churned within the storms. "Whatever it is, we can't let fear drive us. We've come too far to turn back now," Roger barked softly, his ears perked as he sniffed the air, his instincts alerting him to something just beyond the realm of human perception. Bill knelt beside his dog, placing a reassuring hand on Roger's back. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" The dog sniffed the ground, his gaze shifting toward a nearby thicket. Bill followed the direction of Roger's focus, squinting into the darkness. There was something glinting faintly in the underbrush, a flash of metal that caught the lantern's light. "Let's take a look," Bill said, and together they approached the thicket, Gus keeping the lantern steady. As they drew closer, the light revealed an old rusted horseshoe half buried in the earth. Bill knelt down, brushing away the dirt with his fingers. "Looks like it's seen better days. Could belong to one of the lost souls from the ridge. Or it could just be junk," Gus remarked, though there was a tinge of curiosity in his tone. "But then again, sometimes junk has a way of telling a story." Bill turned the horseshoe over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, and noticed something etched along the inner curve, a series of strange symbols that resembled those on the map. "Gus, look here. I reckon this might be more than just a horseshoe." Gus leaned closer, his eyes widening. "You think it's a clue? Maybe it's pointing us to something important." "I'd wager it's worth following up," Bill replied, a sense of excitement thrumming in his chest. If we can figure out what these symbols mean, it could lead us to the heart of the storm. Roger whined softly, his gaze darting back toward the path they had come. Bill sensed the unease in his dog, and it sent a shiver down his spine. "What is it, boy? You sense something?" Gus straightened, his own unease palpable. "Might be wise to keep moving. Whatever's out here doesn't seem too keen on us being around." With renewed urgency, they pocketed the horseshoe and pressed on, the lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like phantoms among the trees. The air crackled with electricity, and the distant thunder grew louder, a deep growl in the belly of the night. As they approached the base of Thunder Ridge, the ground began to slope upward, and the trees thinned out, revealing a rocky expanse that jutted into the sky. Bill could see flashes of light in the distance, illuminated by the storm that loomed overhead. "We're getting close, Gus. Look at those clouds." "Sure are gathering," Gus replied, his voice tense. "Feels like the whole world's holding its breath, waiting for something to break." They climbed steadily, Roger leading the way, his instincts guiding them toward the source of the storm's fury. The winds whipped around them, carrying the scent of rain mixed with something more sinister, a metallic tang that made Bill's skin prickle. At last, they reached a rocky outcrop that overlooked the valley below, where dark clouds churned violently. The lightning flashed in ominous patterns, illuminating the sky for brief, heart-stopping moments. "This must be it," Bill said, his voice almost drowned out by the roar of the wind. Roger stood at the edge, growling low in his throat, ears pricked. It was then that Bill noticed a series of jagged rocks jutting out from the mountainside, arranged in a pattern that mirrored the symbols on the horseshoe. "Gus, look over there! I reckon we might be onto something." As they moved closer, the atmosphere thickened with a palpable energy, a sensation that sent shivers down Bill's spine. The storm above raged like a beast in a cage, and he could feel the weight of its wrath pressing down upon them. "Whatever we find, we need to tread lightly," Bill cautioned, glancing at Gus, whose face mirrored the tension in the air. "This storm ain't just a natural occurrence, it's something else entirely." Gus nodded, his eyes scanning the rocky terrain. "I've got a feeling we're about to find out just what that something is." With Roger leading the way, they stepped cautiously toward the heart of the tempest, unaware of the ancient forces that stirred just beneath the surface, waiting for their arrival. The storm crackled with anticipation, and in that moment, the fate of all three hung delicately in the balance, poised on the edge of revelation and peril. Bill squinted against the storm's glare, his heart pounding like a hammer on an anvil. The ancient rocks loomed over him like silent sentinels, their jagged edges sharp against the tumultuous sky. He felt the weight of the horseshoe in his pocket, an iron talisman against the unknown. With every gust of wind, Roger's growls deepened, a rumble of warning that made the hairs on the back of Bill's neck stand on end. "Steady, Roger," Bill said, kneeling to pat his dog's flank. "You're the best scout I could ask for, but I reckon we need to keep our wits about us." He glanced at Gus, who was fidgeting nervously, his eyes darting from the swirling clouds to the rocky formation ahead. "Yeah, but I can't shake this feeling, Bill," Gus replied, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. "Like we're walking into a trap, or worse." "Maybe," Bill allowed, rising to his feet, "but we can't turn back now. If there's any truth to those symbols, it might lead us to the heart of whatever's causing this storm. Let's take a closer look." With Roger forging ahead, Bill and Gus followed, the lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits on the rocky ground. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with a static energy that tingled against their skin. Bill examined the rock formations closely, tracing the patterns with his fingers, trying to decipher the meanings behind the symbols that echoed those on the horseshoe. "Looks like a map of sorts," he muttered, more to himself than to Gus. "A guide to something buried deep, but buried where? And what incarnation does it point to? Maybe the old mine?" Gus suggested, peering at the jagged stones. "They say there's a reason folks stopped going there. Something about strange occurrences and shadows that move on their own." "Could be," Bill mused. "But if that's the case, we'll need to tread careful like. Whatever's down there, I'd wager it's not too keen on visitors." Roger stopped abruptly, tail stiff and nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing toward a cluster of boulders that formed a natural alcove. "What's caught your fancy, boy?" Bill asked, following the dog's gaze. "You smell something?" Before he could finish, Roger bolted towards the alcove, barking sharply. Bill and Gus exchanged glances, then hurried after him, their boots crunching on loose gravel. As they rounded the boulders, they stumbled upon a small cave, the entrance half hidden by a tangle of roots and moss. "Would you look at that?" Gus breathed, peering into the dark opening. "Could be a way in. You reckon we should?" Bill hesitated, glancing back at the raging storm above, then at Roger, who stood poised at the entrance, ears perked and body tense. "Seems like it's calling us, Gus. We should at least have a look inside, but we ought to keep the lantern low and our voices down." They stepped inside, the cool air of the cave washing over them like a river of ice. The walls glimmered faintly, dotted with mineral deposits that caught the lantern light. Bill could feel a pulse of energy thrumming in the air, almost as if the cave itself was alive, breathing with the storm outside. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of markings on the wall that mirrored the symbols they'd seen earlier. "It seems like this place was important to someone, long before we ever set foot here." Gus nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. "What do you think it means? Some kind of message?" Bill leaned closer, tracing the symbols with his finger. "Could be. Or maybe it's a warning. Folks used to say this land was sacred, tied to the spirits of those who'd gone before. I reckon they had their reasons for marking this place." Just then, Roger began to whine softly, his gaze fixed on a shadow deeper within the cave. The lantern flickered, casting eerie shapes against the stone. Bill felt a chill run down his spine. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, though part of him feared the answer. Before Roger could react further, a low rumble echoed through the cave, vibrating underfoot like thunder. Bill exchanged a worried glance with Gus, both men suddenly aware that they were not alone. The shadows seemed to deepen, coiling around them like a living thing. "Let's back up, Bill," Gus urged, his voice trembling. "This feels wrong." But as they stepped back, the ground trembled again, and the cave's entrance filled with a brilliant flash of light, blinding them for a moment. When their vision cleared, they found themselves staring at a figure cloaked in a shimmering haze, standing at the edge of the alcove. "What in tarnation?" Bill muttered, feeling the ground shift beneath him as if it were alive. The figure raised a hand, and the air crackled with energy, the storm outside howling like a wild beast. "Leave this place, wanderers," the figure spoke, its voice echoing like the rumble of distant thunder. "The storm you seek is not of this world, and you are not prepared for its fury." Bill's heart raced as he felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him, the line between courage and folly blurring in the face of the unknown. "We're not leaving without answers," he declared, though his voice faltered against the figure's ethereal presence. "We're here to find the truth." The figure's eyes glowed like embers in the night, and with a wave of its hand, the cave filled with swirling winds that seemed to echo the very storm raging outside. "Then prepare yourselves, for the truth is a double-edged sword, and what you seek may lead you to your doom." With that, the figure vanished, leaving only the echo of its warning and the weight of the storm pressing down on them, thick and palpable. Bill exchanged another glance with Gus, and in that moment they both understood the gravity of their quest. The storm wasn't just a tempest above, it was a storm of fate, swirling with secrets yet to be uncovered. The air crackled with tension as Bill stood in the cave, uncertainty gnawing at his insides like a hungry coyote. The figure's warning replayed in his mind like a ghostly echo, but there was no turning back now. He was a man of the frontier, forged in the fires of hard work and determination, and he had never backed down from a challenge yet. "Gus," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, "we need to find out what this place is hiding." He took a cautious step forward, the lantern's glow flickering, casting dancing shadows on the walls, adorned with cryptic symbols. "There's got to be more to it than just these markings." Gus swallowed hard, glancing toward Roger, who was still alert, his nose twitching and ears perked as if sensing something they could not. "You sure, Bill? That apparition didn't seem too friendly. Maybe we ought to hightail it out of here." "Not a chance. We've come too far to let some ghostly warning scare us off," Bill replied, determination hardening his resolve. He knelt down, examining the symbols with a keen eye, his fingers brushing against the cool stone. If these markings mean something, we ought to figure it out. As he studied the glyphs, Roger's restless energy drew his attention. The dog paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to sniff at the ground and whine softly, as if he were picking up on a scent that evaded Bill and Gus. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, glancing back at his faithful companion. "You smell something interesting?" With a sudden burst of energy, Roger darted deeper into the cave, barking with an urgency that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "Gus! Follow him!" Bill called, scrambling to his feet. They hurried after the dog, the flickering lantern casting a fragile glow that barely held back the encroaching darkness. Roger led them to a small chamber within the cave, where the walls narrowed and the air felt thick with the weight of secrets. The ground was uneven, strewn with rocks and bits of earth that had long since settled. In the center of the chamber lay a weathered chest, partially buried beneath a layer of dust and debris. Bill's heart raced. "Now we're talking." He approached the chest carefully, kneeling before it with a mix of excitement and caution. The wood was dark and cracked, the iron hinges rusted but still intact. "What do you reckon's inside?" Gus asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he peered over Bill's shoulder. "Only one way to find out," Bill replied, producing a small knife from his belt. He pried open the lid, the creaking sound echoing ominously in the chamber. Inside, nestled among old rags and faded papers, was a small, intricately carved totem, its surface etched with the very symbols they had seen on the cave walls. Gus leaned closer, squinting at the totem. "Looks like it could be a charm of some sort. You reckon it's connected to that figure we saw?" "Could be," Bill replied, gently lifting the totem from the chest. It felt warm against his palm, as if it pulsed with its own life force. But why would someone hide it away in a place like this? As he examined it, Roger began to bark again, this time with an almost frantic urgency. "What's got you so worked up, boy?" Bill asked, turning to see Roger fixated on a dark corner of the chamber. The dog's body was tense, his growl low and steady. "Let's not ignore him," Gus said, eyes darting toward the shadow where Roger was focused. "There might be more to this cave than just some trinkets." Bill nodded, heart pounding, and carefully set the totem back in the chest. He approached Roger, who stood like a sentinel, alert and unyielding. "You stay close, boy," Bill instructed, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. As they moved toward the shadow, the lantern flickered violently, casting long, flickering shapes that danced along the stone walls. Bill's breath caught in his throat as he stepped into the darkness, the air thickening around him. He reached for the lantern, steadying it as the shadows surged forward, morphing and twisting like phantoms come to life. Just then, a sudden gust of wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing the lantern's flame. They were engulfed in darkness, the only sound the pounding of Bill's heart and Roger's quiet whine. Panic welled up inside him, but he forced himself to breathe, remembering the warmth of the totem still fresh in his mind. "Gus!" Bill shouted, but the darkness swallowed his voice, and he felt the ground shift beneath his feet. A low rumble echoed from the depths of the cave, a warning that sent shivers down his spine. "Bill!" Gus's voice broke through the darkness, laced with fear. "What do we do?" Before Bill could answer, a sudden flash of light burst forth from the shadows, illuminating the cave in a spectral glow. There, in the flickering light, they saw it. A figure emerged from the depths, cloaked in shadows, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. "Fate is not easily averted," the figure intoned, its voice like a distant storm. "Your quest has only just begun, and the truth will demand its price." As the glow faded, Bill felt the world around him shift once more, the cave trembling as if it were a living entity. The storm outside roared, and he knew then that whatever they sought was entwined with forces far beyond their understanding. With a steadfast grip on the totem, he looked to Gus, determination igniting in his chest. They were not done yet, not by a long shot. The cave trembled again, a low, mournful sound echoing through its depths, as if the very stone was lamenting the secrets it had long kept. Bill tightened his grip on the totem, feeling the warmth radiate from it like the sun breaking through a stormy sky. He cast a wary glance at Gus, whose face was pale, eyes wide as he stood rooted to the spot. "We can't just stand here, Gus," Bill urged, trying to inject some resolve into his voice. That figure said our quest was just beginning. We've got to figure out what this all means. Gus swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Yeah, but it didn't seem friendly. What if we're in over our heads? Bill took a deep breath, glancing down at Roger, who remained ever vigilant, his ears perked and nose twitching as if he were piecing together the sense of the cave's mysteries. Roger's got a nose for trouble, Bill said, giving the dog a reassuring pat. And I reckon we can trust him. Let's keep moving, but we'll do it smart, no rushing into danger. With the lantern extinguished, the only light in the chamber came from the remnants of that spectral glow which had faded but left a lingering sense of unease. Bill moved cautiously, feeling the uneven ground beneath his boots, each step echoing softly in the stillness. Roger trotted ahead, his senses heightened, leading them further into the darkness. "Stay close, Gus," Bill whispered, peering into the shadows. "Keep your eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary." They pressed deeper into the cave, and as they did, Bill's instincts kicked in. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that prickled at his skin. He reached into his pocket, retrieving a scrap of paper he had found in the chest. It was yellowed with age, covered in symbols that seemed to resonate with the very totem he clutched. "Look at this," Bill said, unfurling the paper as best he could in the dim light. "These markings match the ones on the totem." Gus leaned in closer, squinting at the makeshift map. "What do you think it means? Maybe it's leading us somewhere." "Could be," Bill mused, tracing the lines with his finger. "But if that figure is as real as the dirt under our boots, then whatever this is could be a warning too." Suddenly, Roger barked, his voice echoing against the cave walls. Bill's heart raced as he turned to see the dog fixated on a crevice in the rock, his body tense. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, moving toward Roger's side. The dog growled softly, eyes locked on the dark opening that seemed to lead deeper into the cave. "Should we check it out?" Gus asked, glancing nervously between the crevice and Bill. "Only if you're ready to face whatever's waiting in there," Bill replied, steel creeping into his voice. "But if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it together." With a nod from Gus, they approached the crevice. It was narrow, the walls slick with moisture and jagged like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Roger sniffed the air, then looked back at Bill, his eyes searching for guidance. "All right, Roger, lead the way," Bill said, his heart pounding in rhythm with the echo of his words. As they squeezed through the tight opening, Bill felt the temperature drop, the air becoming thick and heavy. The crevice opened into a larger chamber, and as they stepped inside, Bill could hardly believe his eyes. The walls were adorned with paintings, symbols and scenes depicting ancient rituals, battles, and celestial bodies. A chill ran down his spine. It was as if the spirits of the land had poured their history onto the stone. "By thunder," Gus whispered, his voice reverberating in the vast space. "This is something else." Bill moved further into the chamber, awed by the artistry that surrounded him. "Look here," he said, pointing to a depiction of a figure that bore a striking resemblance to the one they had seen. It stood tall, surrounded by swirling clouds and jagged mountains, with a storm brewing in its wake. "I reckon this must be some kind of guardian spirit." Roger approached the wall, sniffing at the base where the paintings faded into the earth. His growl intensified, low and warning, making the hairs on the back of Bill's neck stand on end. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, kneeling beside the dog. At that moment, Gus gasped, pointing at a section of the wall. "There, that's different. Look at the way those symbols are arranged. They're not like the rest." Bill studied the area Gus indicated, noting the symbols were etched deeper into the rock, almost like they had been carved with purpose. The heart of the totem pulsed in his pocket, as if reacting to the energy in the room. "We should mark this spot," Bill said. "But first, let's see if we can find a way to translate what it says." Gus pulled out a piece of charcoal from his pocket and began to sketch the symbols onto a scrap of paper. Roger continued to sniff around, his demeanor shifting from cautious to curious. Then, without warning, he darted to another part of the chamber, barking with urgency. "Roger!" Bill called, springing to his feet. He and Gus followed the dog, who had stopped at what appeared to be an altar-like stone formation in the center of the chamber. There, amidst the stones, lay a series of small weathered bones and a cluster of stones arranged in a perfect circle. The air felt charged, and Bill realized they were standing at a threshold, perhaps a ritual site. He could almost hear the whispers of ancient voices carried on the breeze that snuck through the crevices of the cave. "Do you think this is where they performed their ceremonies?" Gus wondered aloud, casting a nervous glance at the shadows that seemed to shift around them. "Could be," Bill replied, feeling a sense of foreboding wash over him. "But I reckon it's also a warning. If the figure from earlier was tied to this place, we might be treading on sacred ground." Roger barked again, breaking Bill's thoughts. The dog was fixated on something hidden beneath a loose stone at the edge of the altar. Bill knelt down, feeling the cool earth against his fingers as he pried the stone away. Beneath it lay a small, leather-bound book, its cover cracked and worn with age. "This must be it," Bill said, excitement and apprehension blending together. He lifted the book carefully, brushing off the dust as he opened it. The pages were filled with drawings and writings, some in a language he couldn't decipher, but others were familiar. "Gus, come take a look at this," Bill beckoned, his voice barely above a whisper. "If this contains the history of this place, it might tell us what we're up against." Gus joined him, leaning over the pages as they both felt the weight of the moment. "What if it's a curse or something worse?" he asked, the anxiety creeping back into his voice. "Then we'll face it together," Bill said, feeling a surge of courage. "But first, let's find out just what we're dealing with." As they continued to pore over the ancient text, Roger sat close by, his watchful eyes scanning the shadows. Outside, the storm rumbled on, a reminder of the forces that lay in wait beyond the cave's mouth. But within these walls, amidst the whispers of the past and the pulse of the totem, Bill and Gus were determined to unveil the mysteries that hung in the air like the scent of rain, promising, dangerous, and filled with the unknown. The cave's air grew thick as Bill and Gus leaned over the fragile pages, the flickering light from their lantern casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The musty scent of damp stone and ancient secrets filled their nostrils, and Roger, ever vigilant, remained at their side, ears pricked and nose twitching, as if he could sniff out the very essence of the past lurking in the dark corners. Bill's fingers traced the delicate lines of a drawing that depicted a gathering of figures, their faces obscured, but their postures full of intent. "Looks like a council of sorts," he murmured, his brow furrowed. "Maybe they were protectors of the land, or perhaps something darker." He flipped to another page, revealing an image of a stormy sky, the same swirling clouds they had seen earlier etched into the cave walls. Below it, strange symbols intertwined with depictions of animals and celestial bodies, each one seemingly more elaborate than the last. "Gus, take a gander at this," he said, excitement lacing his voice. "It's like they was trying to communicate with something from above. Look how the figures point toward the sky. What do you reckon that means?" "Could be a call to the spirits," Gus replied, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Or maybe a warning not to disturb what's already been set in motion." He shifted uneasily, glancing back toward the entrance, where the shadows seemed to deepen with each rumble of thunder outside. Roger's low growl broke the tension, pulling Bill from his thoughts. The dog had moved closer to the altar, nose pressed to the ground, as though he sensed something beneath the earth. "What's got you all stirred up, partner?" Bill asked, following Roger's gaze. "You found something?" Roger suddenly darted to the side, his nails scraping against the stone floor as he pawed at a pile of debris, a mix of dried leaves and small twigs that had collected in the corner. Bill and Gus exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. "Let's see what he's onto," Bill said, kneeling down beside Roger. With a swift motion, he cleared the detritus away, revealing a small, shiny object half buried in the dirt. "What in tarnation?" Gus gasped, leaning closer to get a better look. The object was a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, its surface etched with intricate designs that mirrored those in the book. Bill picked it up, feeling its cool weight in his palm. Could this be a key to the symbols we've seen? Or perhaps it belonged to one of those figures from the drawings. "Maybe it's a marker," Gus suggested, his voice low. "A sign of protection, or a binding to something they believed in." He hesitated, looking around the cave as if the very walls were listening. "But I reckon we ought to be careful. If they was protectors, they might not take kindly to us poking around." Bill tucked the pendant into his pocket, a sense of purpose washing over him. "We'll tread lightly, but we can't turn back now. We're already neck-deep in this mystery." He stood, glancing at the book once more. "Let's see if there's a reference to this pendant or anything else that might give us a clue." Duh. As they resumed their search through the pages, Roger remained on high alert, occasionally barking softly as if to ward off unseen dangers. Bill noticed how the dog seemed to react to the cave's every sound, a protective instinct that grew more intense with each rumble of thunder echoing from outside. "What's up, boy?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. "You smell something we can't." Roger's ears perked up, and he moved toward the far wall of the chamber, nose to the ground, then up to the stone surface as if trying to decipher an unseen message. "He's got a nose for trouble," Gus remarked, following the dog's movements. "Let's see where he's leading us." With Roger guiding them, they approached the wall, where the air felt cooler and a low, almost imperceptible hum reverberated beneath the surface. Bill placed his hand against the stone, feeling a faint vibration travel up his arm. "Feels like there's something alive in this rock," he muttered. "What if this is another one of those ritual sites?" "Could be," Gus replied, stepping closer to examine the carvings that adorned the area. "But whatever's here, it's not giving up its secrets easy." He leaned in, squinting at the symbols. "These look like a map of the stars, but twisted in a way that don't sit right with me." Udin, the wind outside, howled, and the cave seemed to respond with a quiver, a whisper of ancient voices caught in the breeze. Roger sat, his eyes fixed on a particular spot, and Bill followed his gaze to a small crack in the wall, just wide enough for a hand to fit through. "What do you think is in there?" he asked, his heart racing. "Only one way to find out," Gus said, determination returning to his voice. "But let's not rush in headlong. We ought to be prepared for whatever might come out of that hole." Bill took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the pendant in his pocket as he reached for the crack, his fingers trembling with anticipation. "You're right. Let's go slow and steady. If this is tied to the guardian spirit we saw, we need to be ready for anything." As he pried the crack open wider, a gust of wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it an eerie sound that echoed around them, a whisper that seemed to say, "Beware." Roger barked once, a sharp warning that sent a chill down Bill's spine. With the storm raging outside and the weight of history pressing in, the trio stood on the precipice of discovery, the mysteries of the past and the forces of nature intertwining in a dance as old as the land itself. With a flick of his wrist, Bill cleared the dirt and loose stones from around the crack. The wind howled through the cave entrance, sending a shiver down his spine. He could almost hear the land whispering its secrets, urging him on. "Gus, can you grab that lantern?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the dark opening. "I reckon we might need some light if we're going deeper into this riddle." Gus nodded, his brow furrowing with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. He fished the lantern from his satchel, striking a match against the rough stone. A warm glow flickered to life, casting dancing shadows across the cave walls. As the light grew, it revealed more of the intricate carvings that adorned the stone, their patterns twisting and coiling like snakes. Roger whined softly, his body tense, ears pricked as he sat near Bill's legs, eyes glued to the crack as if it were a portal to another world. "What's got you so riled up, boy?" Bill murmured, kneeling closer to the opening. The cool air that seeped from the crack carried an earthy scent, tinged with something metallic that set his teeth on edge. "Could be there's a critter in there," Gus suggested, glancing over his shoulder, where shadows pooled ominously. "Or something far worse. You know the tales about these old caves. They say they're a doorway to the spirit world." "Yeah, I've heard those yarns, but I reckon they're just stories to keep the young'uns out of trouble," Bill replied, though a knot of unease twisted in his gut. Still, best to be prepared. He took a moment to steady himself, fingers brushing over the pendant nestled in his pocket, feeling its coolness seep into his skin. With a deep breath, Bill reached into the crack, feeling the rough stone against his fingertips. His heart raced as he probed further, feeling around for anything solid. The crack was deeper than it first appeared, and he could sense an unsettling energy radiating from within, like the breath of something long dormant. "Hold that lantern steady," he instructed Gus, who complied, his own face a mask of concentration. The light illuminated the edges of the crack, revealing more etchings that seemed to pulse in the lantern's glow. "There's something back here," Bill muttered, his voice low. He felt a ridge of stone beneath his fingers and pulled gently, dislodging a small stone that tumbled free, clattering against the floor. The wind outside howled again, as if warning them to back away, but Bill felt an unyielding pull to discover what lay beyond the stone barrier. Gus leaned in closer, eyes wide. "What do you reckon it is? A hidden chamber, or maybe a burial site? I've heard tales of lost treasures hidden away by the ancients." "Could be," Bill said, a mix of hope and caution in his voice. "But treasures don't always come without a price." He glanced at Roger, who was fixated on the crack, growling softly, a low rumble that echoed in the cave's stillness. "What's got you spooked, partner?" Before Roger could answer, or perhaps before he could bark again, a sudden tremor shook the cave, rattling loose stones from the ceiling and sending a cascade of dirt to the ground. "Whoa!" Gus shouted, stumbling back. "What in the wide world of sports was that?" "Just the wind, I reckon," Bill said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "Or maybe it's a sign." He gripped the edge of the crack more firmly, the vibration beneath his fingers intensifying as he pressed deeper. "Whatever's in there is wanting out. I can feel it." Just as he leaned forward, a burst of energy surged through him, a vivid flash of light igniting the crack from within. The lantern flickered, and for a brief moment, the symbols on the walls glowed with an otherworldly light, illuminating the cave like a star-filled sky. Roger barked, a sharp warning that reverberated off the stone. "Look out!" Gus shouted, raising the lantern high, but Bill was already committed. With a final heave, he pulled at the stone, and it shifted, revealing a narrow opening that exhaled a gust of cold air, thick with the scent of ancient earth and something else, something sweet and intoxicating. "What in tarnation?" Bill breathed, unable to finish his thought as a figure emerged from the darkness, half hidden in the shadows. A silhouette, tall and imposing, cloaked in flowing robes that seemed to ripple like smoke. The air thickened with an electric charge, and the very atmosphere of the cave felt alive, swirling around them as if the land itself were awakening. "Step back, Bill," Gus warned, instinctively reaching for the heavy iron poker he had stowed at his side. "What in the name of the good Lord is that?" Roger growled, low and fierce, his posture tense, ready to protect his master from whatever this apparition was. Bill, rooted in place, felt an odd mix of fear and wonder. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though his voice trembled. The figure raised its hand, a gesture that seemed to quiet the storm of emotions swirling within the cave. "You seek the truth," it said, the voice a melodious echo that resonated like wind through the canyons. "But truth often comes with a price. What you uncover may not be what you desire." Gus swallowed hard, glancing at Bill, who stood transfixed by the figure's ethereal presence. "We ain't afraid of the truth," Gus said, his voice steadier than he felt, "but we reckon it'd be wise to know what we're getting ourselves into." The figure nodded slowly as if weighing their resolve. "Then listen closely, for the secrets of the ancients are not for the faint of heart. In the shadows lies a binding, a curse that has lingered for centuries, waiting for those brave enough to confront it." Bill felt the weight of the pendant in his pocket, pulsing as if in response to the figure's words. "What do we need to do?" he asked, the determination in his voice mingling with the unease thrumming in the cave. "Gather the lost pieces," the figure replied, gesturing to the symbols that adorned the walls. "Find the balance, restore what was broken. Only then will the truth reveal itself, and the land be freed from its shackles." With that, the figure began to fade, merging with the shadows, leaving behind an echo that whispered through the cave. "Choose wisely." As the last flicker of light vanished, the cave returned to its somber silence, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder outside and Roger's soft whine. Bill turned to Gus, heart racing. "Looks like we got ourselves a real mystery to solve," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A mystery that might just put us in the crosshairs of something far bigger than we ever imagined," Gus replied, looking around with wary eyes. "But I reckon we can't back down now. We'll need to figure out what these symbols mean and find those pieces." Roger barked once more, as if to affirm their resolve, and the three of them stood together, a bond forged in the heart of the earth, ready to face whatever awaited them in the uncharted depths of the mystery. The storm outside raged on, but within the cave a new journey began, one that would weave their fates with the very essence of the land itself. As the echoes of the figure's warning faded into the cave's shadows, Bill felt a shiver run down his spine. The air was thick with anticipation, and he could almost hear the whispers of the ancients, beckoning him to uncover their hidden truths. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. "Gus, we gotta find out what these symbols mean. There's gotta be something here that'll help us." Gus nodded, his brow furrowing in thought. "Ain't much light to see by, but we can't let that stop us. Let's have a look at the walls. Maybe there's a map or something hidden in those carvings." With that, Bill and Gus moved closer to the symbols, their lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. Roger, ever vigilant, trotted beside them, his ears perked and nose sniffing the air, attuned to something just out of reach of human understanding. As they examined the intricate carvings, Bill noticed that some symbols resembled those he'd seen in old cowboy tales about lost treasures and cursed lands. "These here looked like constellations," he murmured, tracing his fingers over a pattern that swirled like the night sky. "Might be a map of sorts, leading us to where those lost pieces are hiding. Or maybe where the curse started," Gus replied, his voice low, a note of caution creeping in. "We best be careful, Bill. The land's got its secrets, and it don't take kindly to strangers meddling in its affairs." Bill nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental. "Let's write down what we can," he suggested, pulling out a scrap of paper from his pocket, its edges frayed from time and use. "If we can decipher this, we might just find ourselves some answers." As they sketched the symbols, Roger suddenly froze, his body tense as a coiled spring. The hair along his back bristled, and he growled low in his throat, a sound that reverberated in the cave like a warning shot. Bill and Gus exchanged worried glances, their hands pausing mid-motion. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, moving to kneel beside Roger, who was now sniffing the ground intently, his nose tracing a line toward the far wall where the shadows seemed to deepen. Roger's eyes darted back to Bill, then to the wall, as if urging him to follow. "You sense something, don't you?" Bill said, rising and moving closer, his heart pounding in his chest. Just then, a low rumble echoed through the cave like distant thunder from a storm far away. Bill's stomach dropped. "That ain't no ordinary sound," he said, glancing at Gus, who nodded, a look of apprehension etched across his face. "We best move quick before whatever's stirring down here gets restless." Together, they approached the wall where Roger had been focused, and as they drew near, the symbols seemed to pulse with a faint light, as if they held their own heartbeat. Bill squinted, trying to decipher the markings. "This here looks like a doorway," he whispered, pointing to a series of intricate lines that formed an archway. "What do you reckon?" Gus leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "Could be, but I reckon it needs something to open it up, something that fits." Bill felt the pendant in his pocket thrum against his thigh, a gentle reminder of its presence. "What if this is what we need?" He pulled it out, the metal gleaming dully in the lantern light, the symbols engraved on it oddly similar to those on the wall. "Try it," Gus urged, his excitement mingling with trepidation. "But be ready for anything." Bill approached the archway, heart racing, and pressed the pendant against the symbols. As it met the stone, a deep rumble shook the cave, and the air thickened with tension. Light flared from the symbols, illuminating the cavern in a soft glow, and for a heartbeat, the world fell silent. Then, with a grinding sound that echoed like the groan of the earth itself, the wall began to shift. Dust and loose stones tumbled away as a hidden door creaked open, revealing a passageway that beckoned like a dark maw. Bill's pulse quickened, both with fear and exhilaration. "Did it work?" Gus breathed, stepping closer, eyes wide with wonder. "I reckon it did," Bill replied, the words escaping in a whisper. "But it don't look safe." Roger stepped forward, tail wagging slightly but still on high alert, as if he could sense something lurking just beyond the threshold. He sniffed the air, letting out a low whine that echoed in the dimness. "Let's be smart about this," Gus said, eyeing the passage warily. "We ain't alone in this cave, and I don't fancy what might be waiting for us down there." Bill nodded, his heart thumping like a jackrabbit in a snare. We'll keep our wits about us. Whatever we find, we face it together. With that, he took a cautious step forward, the lantern raised high to illuminate the path ahead. As they crossed the threshold, the air grew cooler and the shadows deepened, swallowing them whole. The cave whispered secrets older than time, and the two men, along with their loyal dog, stepped into the unknown, ready to confront whatever lay in wait. The storm outside howled, but within the earth, a new adventure awaited, one that would intertwine their fates with the very fabric of the land. The passage swallowed them, shadows clawing at their heels as they ventured deeper into the earth. Bill raised the lantern high, its flickering flame casting long, erratic shadows that danced across the rough-hewn walls. The air felt different down here, thicker, charged with an energy that set his teeth on edge. Each step echoed, a reminder that they were not alone in this ancient labyrinth. Roger moved ahead, nose to the ground, sniffing out the scents that filled the damp air. His instincts were sharper than a hawk's talon, and Bill trusted the dog implicitly. If trouble was brewing, Roger would be the first to know. "Easy, boy," Bill whispered, half-consciously mirroring the animal's caution. They could feel the weight of the earth around them, a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things. As they walked, the tunnel widened, revealing a larger chamber that appeared to hum with a life of its own. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like teeth, dripping water into puddles that glimmered in the light. Bill lowered the lantern, casting its glow over the ground, where a series of odd footprints marred the earth, shallow and dragging, leading deeper into the heart of the cave. "Gus!" Bill called softly, his voice reverberating in the stillness. "You see these marks? They ain't just animal tracks." Gus knelt beside the prince, brow furrowed in concentration. "You're right, Bill. Looks like someone or something has been through here recently." He glanced up, eyes narrowed. "And they didn't come with good intentions, if you catch my drift." Roger sniffed the air again, his ears perked up as if he could hear the whisper of spirits past. The dog moved from print to print, his tail stiff and his posture tense. "You think it's connected to that crate?" Bill asked, a lump forming in his throat. The crate, with its false bottom and strange symbols, loomed large in his mind like a specter. "Could be," Gus replied, glancing back at the tunnel they had just emerged from. "But we ain't figured out what it is yet. Let's keep moving. Whatever's down here, I don't reckon it'll wait for us to solve its riddles." As they ventured further, the air grew cooler still, and the soft drip of water morphed into a steady trickle. Bill noticed how the walls began to change, the rough stone giving way to a smoother surface, almost polished. The symbols they had seen earlier flickered in the lantern light, appearing sporadically along the walls as if guiding their way. "See that?" Bill pointed. "Those symbols are all over, like a trail of breadcrumbs." He leaned closer, tracing his fingers over the carvings, each one pulsating with a faint glow. "They're leading somewhere. Then let's follow them," Gus urged, his voice a low growl of determination. "But we best stay sharp. I feel like we're being watched." Bill nodded, his heart racing. They pressed on, the light from the lantern illuminating the path, revealing more of the strange etchings, scenes of men and beasts entwined in a dance that seemed both celebratory and sinister. The images told a story, one that was lost to time but echoed through the ages. Suddenly, Roger stopped dead in his tracks, body tense and eyes wide. He growled softly, the sound rumbling deep within his chest. Bill glanced down, concern etching his features. "What is it, boy?" he asked, instinctively reaching down to soothe the dog. Before Roger could respond, a low, haunting sound resonated through the chamber, a deep, throaty rumble that shook the very ground beneath their feet. It was a sound like thunder, but with an eerie, unnatural quality that sent chills racing up Bill's spine. "Time to go!" Gus shouted, his voice urgent as he grabbed Bill's arm. "Whatever that is, it ain't friendly." With Roger leading the way, they dashed down the passage, the lantern swinging wildly. They could hear the sound growing louder, a cacophony of whispers intertwining with the rumble, as if the very walls were alive with secrets yearning to escape. "Keep moving," Bill urged, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The symbols on the wall began to glow brighter, as if responding to their fear, illuminating the path ahead like a beacon. We need to find a way out, or a way to face whatever's coming. Just then, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a fissure opened in the rock, revealing a hidden chamber. Bill skidded to a halt, eyes wide as he took in the sight before him. The chamber was filled with strange artifacts, old weapons, rusted trinkets, and a collection of bones that whispered tales of the past. In the center, a stone altar stood, adorned with more symbols, and atop it rested a glowing crystal that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Bill felt an irresistible pull toward it, as if the very essence of the land beckoned him closer. "What in tarnation?" he breathed, unable to tear his gaze away. "Don't touch it," Gus warned, stepping forward as if to shield Bill from temptation. "That could be what brought whatever's hunting us right here." But Roger was already moving closer, drawn to the crystal with an intensity that left Bill uneasy. The dog's instincts seemed to guide him, and as he approached the altar, the glow intensified, bathing the chamber in a surreal light. "Roger, wait!" Bill called, but the dog was undeterred, standing before the altar, tail raised and eyes locked onto the crystal. The rumbling sound grew louder, echoing through the cavern like a storm on the horizon. As Bill and Gus exchanged a look, the realization struck them like a bolt of lightning. This was no ordinary find. Whatever lay ahead held the power to awaken the land's secrets, and in doing so, it might also awaken the darkness lurking just beyond their understanding. The air thickened with anticipation, and Bill knew they had crossed a threshold from which there might be no return. Bill felt the weight of the moment settle heavily upon his shoulders. The glowing crystal pulsed like a heartbeat, and every instinct he had screamed at him to turn back. But Roger stood resolute, his fur bristling with a mix of excitement and wariness. The dog's keen senses seemed to be picking up on something Bill could not yet comprehend. "Gus," Bill said, his voice low and steady, "we need to be smart about this. Whatever that crystal is, it ain't just for show." "Ain't that the truth?" Gus replied, eyes narrowed in suspicion. He stepped back, trying to observe the scene with a critical eye. "We ought to figure out what it does before we go messing with it. I reckon it could be a key or a trap, and I don't fancy being the ones who find out which." The rumble echoed again, vibrating through the walls like the distant growl of a hungry beast. Roger whined softly, his eyes darting from the crystal to Bill, then back again, as if he were the bridge between their world and something far more primal. "I know you sense it, boy," Bill murmured, crouching down to meet his dog's gaze. "But we gotta be careful." Just then, Roger took a step closer, and the glow of the crystal brightened, illuminating an inscription on the altar that had gone unnoticed. Bill squinted, trying to make out the faded symbols. "What's that say?" he asked, half to himself. "Looks like some kind of language," Gus replied, edging closer, his lantern casting flickering shadows across the stone. "If I had to wager, I'd say it's a warning, something about the balance of life and death. Might be this whole place is a graveyard of sorts. Or a shrine," Bill added, feeling a chill creep up his spine. "You think the folks who built this place were paying homage to whatever they buried here?" "Could be," Gus said, his brow furrowed in thought. "But if it's a shrine, then it's got a guardian of some kind, and I don't reckon it's in a good mood." As if on cue, the ground trembled again, a low growl resonating through the chamber. Bill could feel the fear prickling at the nape of his neck. "We gotta hurry," he said, glancing at the chamber's mouth. "Whatever's coming doesn't seem too pleased we're intruding." He took a cautious step toward the altar, the light of the crystal illuminating the symbols around it in an otherworldly glow. Each etching seemed to dance with life, and Bill could almost hear whispers, hushed voices of the past warning him, urging him to turn away. He knew he shouldn't, yet his curiosity pulled him like a moth to a flame. "Hold on there, Bill," Gus cautioned, his voice sharp. "You can't just go reaching for things that glow like a firefly on a summer night. We're in deep enough as it is." But before Bill could respond, Roger whined again, stepping forward until he was nose to nose with the crystal. The dog's eyes reflected the glow, and something in Bill's chest tightened. "I think he knows something we don't," he murmured, feeling a mix of pride and dread. Just then, the whispers became clearer, rising above the rumbling like a forgotten song. "Awaken! Awaken!" they seemed to chant, drawing Bill closer. "Guardian of the forgotten, hear our plea." Gus stepped forward, his eyes wide. "What in tarnation? You hear that too?" "Yeah," Bill replied, his heart racing. "It's like the crystal's calling out." Roger barked, snapping Bill from his trance. The dog turned and faced the passage they had entered from, his stance alert. He seemed to sense something lurking beyond the flickering shadows, something that was inching closer with each passing moment. "Let's not stick around to find out what it is," Gus urged, stepping back and gripping Bill's arm tightly. "If we don't hightail it, we might not get a chance to run." Bill nodded, the urgency of their situation piercing through the enchantment of the moment. He took a step back from the altar, his eyes still glued to the crystal. "But we can't leave empty-handed. There's got to be something here that can help us understand what's going on. Understanding is all well and good, but I'd rather keep my hide intact," Gus replied, glancing nervously toward the shadows. Just then, Roger let out a sharp bark, the sound cutting through the air like a knife. The chamber rumbled again, and a shadow flickered at the edge of the passageway, a dark silhouette emerging from the depths of the tunnel. Bill's breath caught in his throat as he took in the figure, a tall, gaunt spectre wrapped in tattered cloth, its face obscured by a hood. "Who dares disturb the slumber of the ancients?" the figure intoned, its voice a low, echoing whisper that seemed to resonate from the very stones of the chamber. "You tread upon sacred ground." Gus's grip tightened on Bill's arm. "We best skedaddle, Bill. That's the guardian you were talking about." Bill took a deep breath, heart pounding. "I know we're in a pickle, but we can't leave yet. There's too much at stake." He stepped forward, forcing his voice to remain steady. "We mean no harm. We came looking for answers." The spectre's hood tilted slightly, as if considering Bill's words. "Answers come at a price," it replied, voice laced with ancient power. "What are you willing to sacrifice to unveil the truth?" Bill's mind raced. He glanced at Gus, who looked just as bewildered, and then back at Roger, who stood firm and resolute. In that moment, he realized the cost of their curiosity may very well be more than they had bargained for. But as the shadows loomed closer, he knew that whatever lay ahead would test not just their courage, but their very souls. The spectre hovered before them, a chilling presence in the otherwise silent chamber. Bill's heart drummed against his ribs as the truth dawned upon him. This was not just a guardian, it was a gatekeeper to the secrets buried within the earth. He felt the weight of its gaze, an ancient intelligence probing the very marrow of his thoughts. "What sort of price are we talking about?" Bill asked, his voice steady despite the tremors of fear beneath it. He had learned long ago that in matters of the unknown, it paid to keep one's wits about them. "We ain't got much in terms of riches, but we can offer our skills. We're good with our hands, hard workers, and we can help with any tasks you might have." The spectre remained still, its form undulating like smoke caught in a breeze. "The price is not material, young seeker. It is of your essence, your memories, your fears. Only then shall the truth be revealed." Gus stepped forward, his brow knit in confusion. "What in the wide world of sports does that mean? Sounds like some hocus-pocus to me." "Every legend has a grain of truth," Bill replied, his mind racing. "Maybe it's speaking of a test. Perhaps it wants us to confront our pasts, face what we've been running from." Roger whined softly, his ears perked, gaze darting between the spectre and the dark passage behind them. The dog's instincts were sharp, and Bill could sense the unease radiating from his loyal companion. "What's it, boy?" he murmured, crouching low to meet the dog's gaze. "You see something?" Roger turned his head slightly, sniffing the air, then fixed his eyes back on the spectre, as if weighing the danger lurking in the shadows. Bill felt a wave of appreciation wash over him for the dog's loyalty and sharp senses. If there was trouble afoot, Roger would be the first to know. "Speak your fears," the spectre urged, its voice a haunting melody that echoed off the walls. "Only by laying bare your soul can the knowledge you seek be yours." Gus cast a sidelong glance at Bill, a mixture of disbelief and trepidation in his eyes. "You really think we ought to tell this thing our deepest secrets? Seems like a good way to end up in a pickle jar." Bill straightened, swallowing hard. "We don't have much choice, Gus. If we want to understand what's going on here, we gotta take the plunge. Besides, I reckon we could all use a good dose of truth." "I'll go first," Gus said suddenly, his bravado faltering. "I've always been afraid of the dark. Ever since I was a kid, the shadows would scare me silly. Always thought something was lurking just out of sight, waiting to pounce." As he spoke, the spectre's form flickered, a shimmer of dark energy swirling around it. "Face your fear, and it shall be laid to rest," it commanded. What you hide shall be your burden no longer." Gus gulped, his eyes wide, but he stood firm, as if confronting an invisible foe. "Well, I reckon I've spent too much time worrying about things that ain't real. I ain't scared no more." At that declaration, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, and a flicker of light danced along the walls. Bill felt a strange warmth pulse in the air, as if the shadows themselves were retreating. "Your turn, Bill," Gus said, his voice shaking slightly. "What's gnawing at you?" Bill took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his own fears press against his chest. "I've spent most of my life running from my past. Lost my family too young, and ever since, I've been trying to fill that void with wandering and drinking. I reckon I'm scared of being alone, of not being enough." The specter's form shimmered once more, and Bill felt a strange connection to the entity, as if it understood the depths of his sorrow. "Face your loss, and find strength in your vulnerability," it whispered, echoing his pain. Bill nodded, feeling a surge of determination coursing through him. "I'm ready to face it, whatever it takes." Roger barked, an urgent sound that snapped Bill's focus back to the shadows. The air grew heavy, thick with an electric tension, and the rumble of the earth grew more pronounced. From the depths of the passage, a new sound emerged, a low growl, followed by a series of snapping sounds like bones cracking underfoot. "Bill!" Gus shouted, his voice rising in panic. "What's coming?" The specter's form flickered, its voice rising above the chaos. "The shadows feed on your fear. Embrace your truth and they shall dissolve." With a sudden rush of resolve, Bill turned to the specter, eyes blazing. "I've faced my past. I ain't scared of you or whatever lies in the dark. Show us what we need to know." In that moment, the air crackled with energy. The specter raised its arms, and the chamber erupted in a blinding light, illuminating the symbols carved into the stone. Bill could see now that they were not mere etchings. They told a story of sacrifice, of ancient guardians, and of a darkness that had once been vanquished but now threatened to return. As the glow enveloped them, the shadows recoiled, but the growling grew louder, more insistent. Roger barked fiercely, his hackles raised, ready to protect his master against whatever emerged from the depths. Bill felt the dog's strength bolster his own, and he understood now that the bond they shared was a shield against the dark. "Together, Gus," Bill called, gripping his friend's shoulder. "We face this as one." In that instant, the specter's voice rang out once more, a powerful incantation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the chamber. "Awaken, spirits of the ancients, rise to defend the light." A surge of energy coursed through Bill, and he felt as though he were part of something greater, a force that transcended time and space. The darkness swirled, the growls morphing into a cacophony of despair as the ancient magic ignited. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light exploded outward, illuminating the entire cavern, and Bill could see the shadows for what they truly were, lost souls, trapped in a cycle of fear and regret. They wailed and howled, desperate for release. "Release them!" Bill shouted, feeling the pull of compassion and empathy. "Let them find peace." In response, the specter, now fully revealed, extended its hand toward the shadows. "Let go of your fears, for they do not define you. Seek the light, and you shall find your way." With Roger's loyal bark echoing in his heart and Gus by his side, Bill stepped forward, embracing the light that filled the chamber. Together, they faced the darkness, determined to break the chains of fear and set the lost souls free. The air shimmered with potential, and as the echoes of the past began to fade, a new dawn beckoned, one filled with understanding, courage, and the promise of a brighter future. The chamber settled into an eerie silence, the oppressive weight of fear lifting as Bill, Gus, and Roger stood at the heart of the once turbulent space. The flickering light cast by the specter illuminated the walls, revealing intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of their own. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone, carried an undercurrent of something profound, something that resonated with Bill's very core. "Did you see that?" Gus whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. "They weren't just shadows, Bill. They were lost souls, just like we are sometimes." Bill nodded, still feeling the reverberations of the incantation echoing through him. "We freed 'em, Gus, but something tells me we ain't done yet. He turned to Roger, who was sniffing around the perimeter of the chamber, his ears perked and alert. "What is it, boy?" Roger's nose twitched and he let out a low growl, not menacing but more curious. The dog padded toward a darkened corner where the light struggled to penetrate. Bill followed, his heart racing as he approached the spot Roger was focused on. There, half hidden beneath a layer of dust and rubble, was a weathered wooden box, similar to the crate that had started their journey, but smaller and more ornate, its corners decorated with strange carvings that echoed the symbols on the chamber walls. "Gus, come take a look at this," Bill called, crouching down to inspect the box. The wood was smooth and dark, and he could feel a hum of energy thrumming beneath its surface, almost as if it was alive. Gus knelt beside him, brushing off the dust with his hand. "Looks like it's been here a long spell. What do you reckon it holds?" "Only one way to find out," Bill said, glancing at Roger, who was now wagging his tail, eager for the next adventure. With a firm grip, Bill lifted the lid. The box creaked open, revealing a collection of small, intricately carved stones, each one etched with a symbol that mirrored those lining the chamber walls. "What in tarnation?" Bill murmured, picking one up. The stone felt warm against his palm, sending a ripple of energy up his arm. Gus leaned closer, eyes squinting as he read the symbols aloud. "These look like old guardian marks. I reckon they're meant to protect something or someone. Maybe they're part of the same magic that brought those souls back," Bill suggested, feeling a connection to the stones. "Could be we're meant to use them to fight whatever darkness is still lurking." Roger barked again, drawing Bill's attention to the chamber entrance. The air shifted, a chill creeping back in as the shadows began to stir once more. This time they moved with a purpose, coiling and swirling as if they had a will of their own. "Gus, grab one of those stones," Bill said urgently. "I reckon we might need it." Gus snatched a stone, his face pale. "What if it don't work?" "Only one way to find out," Bill replied, bracing himself. "Together, we stand against the darkness." As the shadows thickened, shapes began to form within them, twisted visages of fear and regret, their faces contorted in eternal sorrow. Bill felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the lost souls, their cries echoing in the air. Desperate for release, yet tethered to the fears that held them captive. "Use the stone!" Bill shouted. "Channel the light!" In a rush, Bill held his stone aloft, feeling its warmth radiate through him. "You don't have to be afraid," he cried out to the shadows, his voice steady. "We can help you find peace." The spectre, still hovering nearby, glimmered with a serene light, its form pulsating like a beacon. "Embrace your truth. Let go of the burdens that bind you." With that, Bill threw the stone forward, and it sailed through the air, landing amidst the writhing shadows. An explosion of brilliant light erupted, illuminating the chamber in a warm glow that seemed to swallow the darkness whole. The lost souls paused, their faces turning toward the light, a flicker of recognition sparking within them. "Come to the light!" Gus shouted, his voice echoing with conviction. "You can be free!" One by one, the shadows began to dissolve, their forms unraveling like smoke in the wind. Bill felt the energy of the chamber surge, as if the very walls were rejoicing. Roger barked excitedly, jumping around as the last of the dark figures faded, their anguished cries replaced by a soft sigh of relief. Breathing heavily, Bill turned to Gus, a grin breaking across his face. "We did it! We set 'em free!" But before they could celebrate, the ground trembled again, a deep rumble vibrating through the stone beneath their feet. Bill exchanged a worried glance with Gus. "What now?" Roger growled low, his body tense and alert. Bill knew they weren't finished yet. The shadows may have receded, but the darkness was still lurking, waiting for a chance to strike. "Let's get out of here," Gus suggested, glancing around nervously. "Whatever's left of this place ain't happy with us." "Right you are," Bill agreed, clutching the remaining stones in his pocket. "But first, we ought to find out what else this place might be hiding. There's more to this story than we've uncovered." With Roger leading the way, they moved cautiously toward the passage, the remnants of the ancient magic still thrumming in the air. Bill could feel the weight of the stones in his pocket, a promise of protection and purpose. The shadows had been vanquished, but the mystery of the crate and the forces it had summoned still beckoned them deeper into the heart of the unknown. and as they stepped into the dim light of the passage, Bill felt a spark of hope. Perhaps they were not just wanderers lost in the vastness of the frontier. Perhaps they were destined to be guardians, wielding the light against the dark. Together, the journey had only just begun. As Bill and Gus carefully navigated the passage, the stones in Bill's pocket felt as if they pulsed with purpose, a steady rhythm mirroring the thumping of his heart. The dim light cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the air hummed with an energy that was both exhilarating and unnerving. Roger trotted ahead, his nose twitching, alert for any sign of trouble. "Something ain't right," Gus muttered, glancing back at Bill. "I can't shake this feeling like we're being watched." "Trust your gut," Bill replied, his voice low. "Let's keep our wits about us. If there's anything left to uncover, I reckon it's just ahead." As they rounded a bend in the passage, the air thickened with the scent of dust and decay. A faint light flickered ahead, revealing a larger chamber filled with old crates, some marked with strange symbols, others obscured by time. Bill stepped forward, his instincts sharp. "Looks like we found the source of the trouble." Roger sniffed the ground. His ears perked as he followed a scent trail that led them deeper into the room. Bill crouched down, examining a nearby crate that was slightly ajar. He noticed a familiar insignia etched into the wood, one that matched the carvings on the stones. These crates might have been part of the same shipment that brought the darkness, but it's more than that. Gus leaned closer, peering into the shadows. "What do you mean?" "I reckon these ain't just any old crates. This is a smuggler's den," Bill said, realization dawning upon him. "They've been hiding their ill-gotten goods down here, using the old legends to scare folks away." Suddenly a voice echoed from the shadows, smooth as silk but laced with malice. Well, looks like we've got ourselves some nosy cowboys." Bill turned to see a man step into the light, a tall figure dressed in a duster that swayed as he moved. His eyes glinted with a predatory gleam. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here. Figured those silly tales would keep you spooked long enough." "Who are you?" Bill demanded, standing tall, his hand instinctively resting on the revolver at his hip. "Name's Thorn," the man replied, a smirk curling his lips. "And I've been keeping this treasure all to myself. I used those ghosts to scare away anyone who got too close. A clever trick, if I do say so myself." Gus stepped forward, anger flaring in his eyes. "You've been tormenting the innocent, using their fears against them." Thorn shrugged, nonchalant as he leaned against a crate. "It's the frontier, boys. Only the ruthless survive. You've seen how it is. Folks love a good ghost story. Keeps them from poking around where they don't belong." Bill's brow furrowed as he considered the shadows that had tormented them. Those lost souls. They were real enough, weren't they? Just trapped by your trickery. "Exactly," Thorn laughed, his voice echoing off the walls. "Those poor souls were part of my little show. I made sure to keep their stories alive, to keep them wandering down here, feeding off the fear of the living. But you boys have gone and ruined it." Roger growled low, his stance protective in front of Bill and Gus. The canine's keen senses had sensed the deception before they had even stepped into the chamber. Bill felt a surge of determination. "You're the one who's gonna be ruined, Thorn. You can't keep folks trapped in their fears forever." With a sudden rush, Bill darted forward, but Thorn was quicker, brandishing a dagger that glinted ominously in the dim light. "You think you can take me on? You're outmatched." "Not if I can help it," Gus yelled, lunging at Thorn, but Roger was already ahead, darting between them. The dog leaped, snapping at Thorn's arm, causing the man to stumble backward. In that moment of chaos, Bill seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, wresting the dagger from Thorn's grip. "It's time you faced the music, partner." Thorn's bravado faded as he realized he was cornered. "You can't do this. I'll have my men on you in no time." Bill shook his head, a calm confidence settling over him. "Not if we tell the sheriff what you've been up to. You'll be meeting justice real soon, and I reckon it won't be pretty." With a flick of his wrist, Bill summoned Gus and Roger to his side. Together they bound Thorn with rope, ensuring he wouldn't get away. As they secured him, the shadows in the chamber began to dissipate, freed from the control of the deceitful man. "Those souls," Gus said, glancing around. "They deserve peace." Bill nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful. "And now they'll get it. We'll make sure the sheriff knows what's really been going on here. No more fear-mongering for profit." With Thorn in tow, they made their way back through the passage, the air lighter now that the sinister presence had been banished. As they stepped into the daylight, the sun poured over them like a warm embrace, washing away the last remnants of dread. Roger barked happily, bounding ahead as if he knew they had emerged victorious. Bill chuckled, ruffling the dog's fur. "You did good, boy. Couldn't have done it without you." Gus grinned, slapping Bill on the back. "Looks like we made quite the team, eh?" "Sure did," Bill agreed, glancing toward the horizon. A pair of cowboys and their trusty hound, ready to take on whatever the frontier throws our way next. As they headed back toward town, the promise of new adventures ahead, Bill felt a lightness in his step. They had faced the darkness and emerged unscathed, proving that even the oldest of legends could be unraveled with a bit of courage and a whole lot of heart. The sun set in hues of gold and crimson, and with every mile they left behind the shadows of the past, ready to write their own tale in the dust of the frontier.